Chris Walker was the kind of neighbor everyone loved, friendly, hardworking, and always willing to lend a hand. He and his wife, Angela, had built a beautiful life in their quiet suburban neighborhood, enjoying the peaceful community they called home. But something was missing. One evening, after years of talking about it, Chris finally brought home a golden retriever puppy named Max. The little furball had boundless energy, a wagging tail that never seemed to stop, and a personality as bright as the morning sun. Chris and Angela were overjoyed. Max wasn't just a pet, he was family. Their days were now filled with laughter, playful barks, and cozy cuddles on the couch. But not everyone was thrilled about Max's arrival. Karen Crawford, the HOA president, had made it clear from the beginning that she didn't approve of Chris and Angela living in the neighborhood. She was always finding reasons to send them passive-aggressive letters, claiming their grass was half an inch too tall or their trash cans were placed incorrectly on pickup day. And now, she had set her sights on Max. From the moment she saw Chris walking the puppy, her scowl deepened. "That dog better not cause any problems," she muttered to herself, already scheming. Karen had been looking for an excuse to make Chris's life miserable, and in her mind, Max was the perfect weapon. She scoured the HOA rulebook for anything that could justify banning the puppy but found nothing. That didn't stop her. Late one evening, Chris and Angela decided to go out for dinner, leaving Max safely in their backyard. What they didn't know was that Karen had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment. Under the cover of darkness, she crept across the street and slipped through the side gate of their yard. Max, being the friendly pup he was, wagged his tail excitedly, thinking he was about to get a treat or a belly rub. Instead, Karen scooped him up, huffing as she carried him away. The next morning, Chris and Angela woke up to an eerie silence. No happy barking, no tiny paws padding across the floor. Max was gone. Panic set in as they searched the house, then the yard. Nothing. That's when Angela spotted it, a note taped to their front door. "Due to violations of HOA pet regulations, your dog has been removed. Consider this a warning. Karen Crawford, HOA president." Chris stared at the note, his pulse pounding. Angela's hands trembled as she clutched it. "She took him," Angela whispered. Chris exhaled sharply, his grief quickly turning to rage. What Karen didn't know was that Chris had been prepared for something like this. He turned to Angela with a determined look. "We're getting Max back." And with that, he walked straight to his laptop, where a security camera had captured everything. Chris's hands trembled with barely contained anger as he clicked through the security footage. His gut had told him Karen was behind Max's disappearance, but now he had cold, hard proof. The grainy night vision video showed Karen creeping through their yard, unhooking the gate, and snatching Max in her arms before slipping back into the shadows. Angela covered her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. "She actually took him," she whispered. Chris clenched his jaw, his breathing slow and measured. "Not just took him, she trespassed and stole our dog. She thinks she can bully us into leaving." He exhaled sharply, forcing himself to stay calm. "She's about to learn a lesson." Angela wiped a tear from her eye. "We have to get Max back. Now." Chris nodded. "We will." His first instinct was to march across the street and demand Max's return, but that's exactly what Karen wanted, an emotional outburst she could twist into making Chris the bad guy. No, this needed to be handled strategically. Without wasting another second, he grabbed his phone and dialed the police. The moment the dispatcher answered, he explained the situation with the kind of precision only a man who had dealt with HOA nonsense for years could muster. "I have video evidence of my neighbor trespassing on my property and stealing my dog," he finished. "Her name is Karen Crawford." The dispatcher was quick to respond. "You have security footage confirming this?" "Yes. Clear as day." There was a pause before she replied, "Officers are on their way." Chris hung up, but he wasn't done yet. He scrolled through his contacts and placed a second call, to the city's HOA Oversight Committee. Karen had spent years acting like she was untouchable, terrorizing homeowners with ridiculous fines and threats. She had turned the HOA into her personal kingdom, and anyone who didn't fit her ideal image of the neighborhood faced constant harassment. But what she had never bothered to learn was that Chris wasn't just another resident, he was the one who reviewed HOA complaints at the city level. And this? This was personal. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Chris. What's going on? I need an emergency review of HOA President Karen Crawford's actions, Chris said, keeping his voice level. I have undeniable proof of misconduct, theft, and abuse of power. The voice on the other end grew serious. That's a big accusation. You have evidence. Video footage, Chris confirmed. And it gets worse. She tried to justify the theft by claiming an HOA violation that doesn't even exist. Silence. Then a deep sigh. Send me the footage. If what you're saying is true, Karen won't just lose her position, she'll be permanently banned from any HOA leadership in the city. Chris wasted no time forwarding the video. Done. I'll take this straight to the committee, the voice assured him. And Chris? Good job handling this the right way. Chris hung up just as Angela walked back into the room. The cops are almost here, she said, hugging herself. I can't believe someone would be this cruel. Max didn't do anything to her. Chris softened for a moment, reaching for her hand. I know. But we're going to fix this. Angela nodded, her determination growing. She's not getting away with this. A few minutes later, the distant sound of sirens cut through the quiet night. A police cruiser pulled into their neighborhood, its red and blue lights flashing against the darkened houses. Chris felt a surge of satisfaction. Game over, Karen. As the officers stepped out of their car, Chris took a deep breath. He was ready. It was time for justice. Less than an hour later, flashing red and blue lights lit up the street as a police cruiser pulled in front of Karen's house. Chris and Angela stood at their doorstep, watching as two officers approached the door and knocked. A moment later, Karen swung it open, her expression shifting from annoyance to feigned innocence. Oh, officers. How can I help you? She asked sweetly, as if she hadn't committed a crime the night before. One of the officers got straight to the point. We have a report that you trespassed on your neighbor's property and stole their dog. Karen's fake smile faltered. What? That's ridiculous. That dog was a violation of HOA regulations, and as president, I. The second officer held up a tablet, playing the security footage. The color drained from Karen's face as she watched herself caught in the act. You broke into their yard and stole their dog, the officer said firmly. That's theft, Karen. Karen stammered, her confidence crumbling. I was just enforcing the rules. That dog. You don't have the legal authority to remove someone's pet, the officer cut her off. And according to city records, there are no HOA restrictions against dogs. That's when Chris stepped forward, arms crossed. Karen, I'd love to remind you that I oversee the HOA board regulations for the entire city. I know every rule, every regulation, and now I also know you're a thief. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She had no argument left. Where's our dog? Angela demanded, her voice sharp. Karen hesitated, but with the officers glaring at her, she had no choice. He's in my backyard, she mumbled. The officers immediately retrieved Max, who wagged his tail excitedly the moment he saw Chris and Angela. Angela scooped him up, tears of relief streaming down her face. But Karen's problems weren't over. Karen Crawford, the officer announced, pulling out a pair of handcuffs, you're under arrest for trespassing and theft. Karen shrieked as the cuffs snapped around her wrists. You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. Not anymore, Chris said coldly. Effective immediately, you're fired from the HOA board ***. As Karen was led to the police car, neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, whispering among themselves. The reign of HOA terror was finally over. Chris wrapped an arm around Angela, watching as the squad car disappeared down the street. Max licked his face, as if thanking him for coming to his rescue. Justice had been served. But Chris wasn't done just yet. He had one final move to make, one that would ensure Karen never abused her power again. Karen's shrieks echoed through the neighborhood as the officers led her toward the police car, her hands cuffed behind her back. "This is ridiculous. I was enforcing the rules," she screeched. "I am the HOA president. You can't do this to me." One of the officers, clearly unfazed by her theatrics, sighed. "Ma'am, HOA rules don't override the law. You trespassed, stole private property, and got caught on video doing it. That's theft." Karen's head snapped toward Chris, her face red with fury. "You set me up. This is entrapment." Chris crossed his arms, his expression calm. "You set yourself up the second you stepped onto my property and stole my dog, Karen." Angela clutched Max tightly as the puppy licked her face, oblivious to the chaos unraveling around him. "Let's just be grateful he's safe," she whispered, scratching behind Max's ears. But Chris wasn't done yet. As Karen continued to scream about injustice, the second phase of her downfall was already in motion. The HOA Oversight Committee worked fast, and within an hour, Chris received an official email confirming what he already knew: Karen Crawford was immediately removed from her position. The best part? She wasn't just fired from this HOA. She was permanently banned from holding any HOA position in the city. Chris grinned as he turned his phone toward Karen, who was now standing by the police car, her attitude shifting from rage to panic. "You might want to check your email," he said smoothly. "You don't work here anymore." Karen blinked rapidly, trying to process what he just said. What are you talking about?" "Effective immediately, you're removed from the HOA board. You've been permanently banned from serving in any HOA position in this city," Chris explained, his voice laced with satisfaction. "All those years of bullying people. It's over." Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The reality of her situation was sinking in. The officers guided her into the squad car, shutting the door behind her. "She'll be processed for trespassing and theft," one of them told Chris. "You'll be contacted about the court proceedings." Chris nodded. "Appreciate it, officer." As the squad car pulled away, Karen's reign of terror officially came to an end. The neighborhood, which had been watching the entire ordeal from behind curtains and porches, slowly began to emerge. A few people clapped. Others shook Chris's hand, relieved that Karen was finally gone. "About time," one neighbor muttered. "Should have happened years ago," another agreed. Chris and Angela exchanged a look, then laughed. The nightmare was over. Life in the neighborhood changed overnight. With Karen gone, the oppressive atmosphere she had created lifted. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves out of fear of HOA retaliation were now friendlier, hosting barbecues, chatting in their yards, and actually enjoying the community they lived in. And Max? Max thrived. Now a little older, he still had the same boundless energy and infectious joy that had made Chris and Angela fall in love with him in the first place. Every morning, Chris took him on long walks around the block, where people would stop to pet him and offer treats. He had become a local celebrity, the puppy who took down Karen Crawford. One afternoon, as Chris and Angela sat on their porch, watching Max chase a butterfly in the yard, Angela turned to her husband. "I still can't believe how everything played out." Chris smirked. "I can." She thought she was untouchable. Turns out, she was just one bad decision away from losing everything. Angela chuckled. Think she learned her lesson? Chris leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms. Doesn't matter. She's not our problem anymore. Max ran up to them, tail wagging, his pink tongue hanging out as he flopped down at their feet. Chris scratched behind his ears, smiling. Justice had been served. Their home was finally a place of peace again. And Max was exactly where he belonged.